Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Ankle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from All Hail the Silence, Vertically Mirrored Justice. Or I guess I'm told this album is called Daggers, but so let's go with that. All Hail the Silence is the latest side project from the one and only BT, Brian Transo, who I happen to currently be doing a full discography review of, and I just handed out a perfect score to in my previous video. So All Hail the Silence is a band that BT set up with Christian Burns. BT is handling the synthesizers in production, and Burns handles the vocals. And I guess they're trying to create the same dynamic that Vince Clarke and Andy Bell do in Erasure. And yeah, the entire project is specifically indebted to these guys' love for 80s synth pop. BT was tweeting about hoping this album can have the same effect for someone younger that something like Depeche Mode's Speak and Spell did on him. And he has been gushing significantly about all those old synth pop and new wave legends. Now, I'm not gonna act like I'm the biggest 80s synth pop guy myself, though I did sit through the entire back catalogs of Depeche Mode, Erasure, and Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark back in 2017. I've even kept a handful of albums from each of them to put in rotation every now and then. None of the artists in this genre are a part of my childhood, though, save for a random track here and there like Gary Newman's Cars or something. Regardless, though, I was definitely excited to hear what BT and Christian Burns would bring to the table here. BT, as we all know well by this point, is one of my favorite producers ever. A passion project where he gets to work with one of his favorite genres sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. After listening to it, it's become abundantly clear that anyone who's really into those styles of 80s synth pop is probably gonna love this album. If Violator is your favorite Depeche Mode album, if Organization or Architecture and Morality are your favorite OMD albums, and if those are like a big part of your childhood, this is likely to get a big emotional rush out of you. I can tell this was a project where BT and Christian Burns put a lot of love and effort into it and made it out of their love and nostalgia for that old sound. The production is pretty solid across the board too. It's as good as you would want a BT project to be. It's well balanced and everything for what it's trying to go for. Christian Burns sounds like he's enjoying himself too, putting a lot of passion into his performance and actually sounding kind of different from other performances I've heard from him. Like he was specifically trying to sound like Andy McCluskey or someone like that. And while he doesn't sell it as well as someone like, Andy Bell from Erasure does, he still does pretty damn good. Now as for my own personal enjoyment, I thought this project was alright. I don't know. I feel like I was missing something from this project, though, having not grown up with the old synth pop legends. It's very much designed around nostalgia pandering, and these guys' love for a particular aesthetic that I personally don't have even close to as deep a connection with. I may as well not beat around the bush. While I don't think Daggers was a bad project by any stretch, I did kind of find it to be pretty disappointing, coming from these guys who I know can do a lot better than this. Now again, I do feel like a big part of what it is that what BT and Christian Burns apparently love the most in 80s synth pop isn't necessarily what resonates the most with me in this genre. I feel like the albums I liked most from each of the legends I marathoned weren't necessarily the ones you're supposed to like the most. I mean, I was much more drawn to Depeche Mode albums like Music for the Masses, which provided some weirder twists on the sound and more variety, than I was to albums that played the sound more straight, like Violator. I've kept Erasure's self-titled and Violet Flame albums around, while the classics I'm supposed to love, like The Innocents or Chorus, have just kinda sat around not being listened to that often. And for OMD, easily my personal highlight from them was Dazzle Ships, which some could argue doesn't even really count as synth pop in the first place. I bring all this up because Daggers plays the 80s synth pop sound completely straight all the way through. And that means it did not really play to my taste in the genre. Not to say I don't enjoy the straightforward stuff too, but this album kinda had more of an uphill battle to fight, and unfortunately, across the 14 tracks in this album, all of them play to the exact same sound and style, and it became very stale in one note for me. Daggers doesn't get in and get out in the same way that old classics like Violator and Speak and Spell do. It's padded out to hell and back. This is especially disappointing for me because one of the things I most enjoy about BT's music is the way that he does interesting and unconventional things with popular styles like this. When he makes an 8-minute track, there's going to be a whole bunch of weird side tracks, it'll change and evolve a lot. Of all the people who should be able to make something in this genre that has the weirder twists that I personally enjoy in it, you'd think he'd be able to do it. And I thought that was what we were going to get from the song lengths on this album. All these tracks are like 5, 6, 7 minutes. They have plenty of space to get weird, but none of them really do. Maybe a track like Broken Satellite will have some field recordings in various parts. Video had some cool VHS sound effects right in the beginning. Black and White had that weird part in the middle where the hook just completely floated off into an ambient side track. But for the most part, there's really not much variety. They don't even really have the kind of cool long solo sections or let the production have more in the spotlight in the same way that something like Erase Yourself titled would, which I figured BT would be able to capture really well, but he just never really tries for that kind of thing in a way that really stuck out to me. You'll notice I haven't mentioned much of anything in the way of individual tracks because it's basically all the exact same track over and over, and this is especially a problem because Daggers is an hour and a half long. This album really drags for me. All the tracks blend together in a mushy blob of 80s nostalgia that I don't have, with a couple of choice moments where you get a better hook or the percussion gets more hard-hitting or something like that. I feel like any of these tracks would at least be good out of context to this album. There's none of them that I outright dislike, but as a singular 87-minute experience, this was really dull. This album is in severe need of editing. If it was cut down to just 8 of the best tracks, I would likely get into it a lot more easily. But it sounds like they didn't cut out any of the ideas they had, they just put the entire cutting room floor right here. And BT can do long albums. I mean, These Hopeful Machines is longer than Daggers, and that album just seems to zip by compared to this. And perhaps worst of all, I've listened to this album several times trying to get it to click with me, and I realized that pretty much none of these tracks are getting stuck in my head. This album has no chance of replacing something like Violator and Speak and Spell because it does not have a Just Can't Get Enough or an Enjoy the Silence or Personal Jesus. There are a couple of moments where I feel like there's a hook that really starts to resonate with me, but they're drowned out by just as many tracks that sound exactly the same, but the hook doesn't stick the landing. And the final effect is that it all kind of disappears from my head once I'm done with it. I know by this review it sounds like I hated this album or something, but that's not the case at all. I still think it's fine. And I know the people who are more into 80s synth pop than I am are going to eat it up. They already love the style, and the actual execution from track to track is pretty consistently well done, so these people won't get sick of it. Like I said, I think these are all good tracks individually, and they're really only weighed down by all having to be in the same place. But, yeah, I was still hoping for so much more out of Daggers than what we got. The hooks are hit and miss, and even the best ones aren't the best that have ever come out of BT. It's way too overstuffed and lacking in variety. I could easily cut this album in half and get a much more impactful experience. I don't know. I'll still recommend it to all you synth pop fans out there because it'll give them plenty to love. I think it's well produced and well performed. I can't get too mad at it because I can tell it was totally a labor of love from these guys, but for me personally, this was a pretty big letdown from artists I know are capable of so much better, and I doubt it's gonna stick with me much in the long term. Overall feeling a solid 6 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.